Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. I'm Larry Sashin. Oh, today we have a treat. We're going to be speaking to David Burke, but before we do, Fred, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Morning, everybody. I'm Fred Clashman, editor and publisher, Total Food Service. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. If you read the invitation that I sent out, this is an interesting sort of guy. He has, every chef you see, every chef wants to be an owner. He wants to run. And they have that old saying, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. But today we're going to be speaking to a guy who loves that heat. He has a management company that either owns or runs, I believe, 17 restaurants. But when you always see David, he always has his chef's coat on and he's always in the kitchen. So without further ado, David, why don't you say hello to the people, tell them who you are, and let's get going.
Good morning. I'm Chef David Burke, and nice to be here. And I own, operator, manager, consult for several restaurants, mainly in New Jersey and North Carolina, and been doing it for quite a while now. Since the 70s, I started washing dishes, so I've seen a lot of this industry.
Yes, well, thank you. It was either the late 80s or early 90s. I was my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. I wanted to impress her for her birthday. Now there were, as you know, there are many, many restaurants with beautiful views, and many restaurants that are good restaurants, but they're very seldom do you have the combination of good restaurant and good food together. And I figured I'd reach deep into my pocket and I'd take my wife, to my girlfriend at that time, to the River Café, and we sat by the window, and there to our left was the Brooklyn Bridge, or to the right, it's a long time ago, the Brooklyn Bridge and the Chelsea, not the Chelsea Piers, the city in front of us. And we ordered our food, and out came one after another great dishes. And I find out later on that they were cooked by David Burke. Why don't you tell us about how you got to the Chelsea Piers and your travels up into that point?
Well, I started out in Jersey as a kid, and I worked in a couple of pretty good restaurants, one of which is called Red Horse by David Burke now. Back then, it was called the Fromagerie, famous French restaurant in Rumson. I worked at a Good Country Club. This is all in high school. I went to the Institute of America in 1980. I got out in 1982, and I got a job. I was a good student. I was really into it, and I got an offer to go to Norway and work for the wealthiest family in Norway for a summer to cook in their summer compound. I did that for the summer. I came back. The owner of that home, his name was Stolt Nielsen. He was in the shipping business. He lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, headquarters there. He got me a job at a very great restaurant called La Cremaire up in Banksville, New York. And the chef there was a young guy named Waldy Malouf. And he had just come out of La Côte Basque in New York and the Four Seasons. And he worked at a couple of other really well-known places, the Box Street in New York City throughout the 70s. And Waldy at that time was the head chef at La Côte Basque, and Rick Moon and Charlie Palmer, Frank Crispo, and Todd English were all cooks under him. So Waldy was at La Cremiere. I became his saucier, cook, sous chef, spent 2-3 years with him at La Cremiere. And then I went to Europe a couple times. I went to France for 3 months a couple times, kept coming back to him. And then it was time to leave the suburbs and go to the city. And he got me a job with Daniel Boulud at the Hotel Plaza Attaining. And that was in 1984, when it opened on East 65th Street. I worked there for a period with Danielle to open it. I was the daytime. I was a sous chef for Waldy. I took a pay cut and became the poissonnier or the fish cook at the Hotel Plaza Attaining. And then while I was at the Le Cremaire, I had met Charlie Palmer, who was the chef at a country club called Wakabuck Country Club up in Westchester. And he would come in on Sunday nights while he was off, and I would make Charlie Palmer tasting menus and such. So we got to be somewhat friendly. Charlie calls me up. He's the chef of the River Café. He's got a sous chef position. So I jump out of the Plaza Attaining to the River Café as a sous chef. I was 25, I think. Big job. And or maybe 24, I forget. And that's how I got to the River Café. Then I left the River Café. I did 2 years with Charlie, moved back to France, went to pastry school. And because Buzzy O'Keefe offered me the chef job at the River Café. And I told him I couldn't take it until I learned how to do pastry. So Charlie had given, I think, 9 months or a year notice. And so we had time, and I went and studied pastry before I came back to the River Café. And that was 88. And I came back and took over the River Café.
Just to serve my wife and me. Thank you very much, David. So
that was great. I got to tell you, it was the best experience ever being there. And that was the right time to be cooking in the U.S. I mean, 88, from the late 80s into the late 90s, there was that American food revolution, creative menus, camaraderie. You know, you didn't have Instagram, you didn't have Open Table, you didn't have all the, it was still nuts and bolts and people working 60, 70 hours a week to learn and to advance. And it still wasn't cool to be a chef. It was still hard, and we were still scratching our heads people were still scratching their heads as to why would somebody want to work like this? There was a nugget in there that is called passion.
yes. So if you can list the one or two things, what is the David Burke difference? What makes your restaurants resonate? They're just incredible. I've never been to one that isn't a home run.
Thank you, by the way. I think that it comes with experience. It comes with the remembering what hospitality is, and what the customer sees, I think, and what they want to see. Years ago, when I was younger, I would cook for other chefs and what they would think. We were competitive, and you're cooking for your peers to be accepted. When you're young, you're trying to show off. You might be doing dishes that customers don't even really want, but you think, hey, a sea urchin inside a shell with a custard and buckwheat noodles is really great, or pig's ears is really great, and it sounds like it's a cool dish. But nobody wakes up and nudges their wife and says, hey, honey, we're going out for pig's ears tonight. It doesn't work. So you learn how to give the guests what they want. And that comes in all shapes of the minute how the phone is answered, you walk in the door, what you see, the variety of what's on the menu, the music, the drink list, the uniform, the design. And then the wow factor for us is how to present food. And how do you present food in a way that is smart, first of all, delicious, but also historically correct, I like to say, or geographically correct, or seasonally correct. Meaning understanding the basics and the history of food and the chemistry of what goes together and not. Like what is the balancing act of putting a great duck dish together or a pork dish to balance out the fat, right? How do you put together a dish, a crudo dish that makes sense and that's not too fusionistic or silly? How do you do an architectural dish that is stacked up like we did at the River Café back then, and Alfred Portale did a great job? How do you do that makes a lot of sense and it eats and it doesn't become a mess? it's craftsmanship, and it's knowledge. And I think and if you take it seriously, and I do, I might have fun doing it, but it's a serious thought process of is this a smart dish to put on the menu or not? I cook for the people. I don't cook for critics, and I don't cook for my peers. I cook for my customers.
I.e., one of your dishes that I see all the time at your new place in White Plains. The old saying is, everybody loves bacon.
Yeah.
Who serves bacon on a clothesline?
I do. A lot of other people now too.
Yeah.
I was in a restaurant in Lisbon last year, and in the first I was in a cafe having coffee. I got off a cruise ship, reading Time Out magazine. And it was a picture of bacon clothesline on like the opening 2 pages of what's hot and what's new in Lisbon. And I happened to go to that restaurant for lunch, and I was laughing at that. I told the waitress, I was with a guest, and she spoke Portuguese, and she told the waitress that it was my creation, and they just laughed about it. So did I. Like no way. So because that dish has traveled the globe, that presentation is so good and makes so much sense, and is so fun and so shareable, Instagrammable, and is right for the times, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's easy to execute from a kitchen standpoint when on a busy restaurant. So that's a grand slam dish. And again, first of all, you start with something everybody likes, and then you're accessorizing it and making it more fun to serve, more delicious to eat, and something that you can chew. You took a piece of bacon and elevated it, and literally elevated it too. We hung it up and hung it up to dry, and that all came from a mistake. That was one thing led to another, and most of my best dishes are me working on one thing, and then the aha moment says, no, it doesn't work. Let's do it with this. And it's tinkering, not letting something go. When you grab a good idea, you shouldn't give up. Sometimes it takes a year or 2 or 3 or something but I have all these Post-it notes in my head that I have floating around, and sometimes you pull 2 or 3 of them down and you connect them, and you got a dish.
Okay, so
Hold on a second.
Go ahead, Fred.
What happens, David? What happens when the price of bacon triples, like it has? And I guess that sort of leads into, how do you go from art to running a business of a restaurant?
The same thing happens when the price of gas goes up to $4 a gallon.
Yep.
People need to eat. We might not sell as much. We sometimes we take a little of the haircut, and sometimes we pass it on. So we have to be smart about that. It's a good question. Or maybe we don't sell as much bacon, but sometimes we make more bacon. We make more money selling a green salad than a bacon. To be honest with you, well, we make more friends selling bacon. Part of our marketing idea. I mean, and it makes people come back, but and it also, here we are talking about it. But it's there's the balance. And beef prices go up, you want to sell more fish. You try to engineer the menu so that you have your costs still in line. But it gets hard. Labor is the real enemy over food costs at this point, especially in cities like New York, where the minimum wage is so high. Not only is the minimum wage high for minimum wage, first of all, I shouldn't say it's not high. The minimum wage for a dishwasher at $15 is not high, although it's high for what we can charge for, because the restaurant business needs lots of employees. The minimum wage for waiters is what's high, which hurts it. A waiter in New York makes about $11 or $12 an hour, and in New Jersey they make $3 or $4. Yet they both get tipped 20%. Isn't that strange? So if a waiter in New York is making close to minimum wage, which is 15, and they're making, let's say, 11, and the minimum wage in New Jersey is 15, and the waiter there only makes 4, even though waiters shouldn't be complaining. They make plenty of money, at least in the restaurants that I've been familiar with. That there's a big difference there, right? And
so at what point?
Go ahead.
At what point did you realize not only were you going to? At what point did you realize you're going to have to run a business as well as be an artist? And how did you figure that out? And how do you continue to figure that out?
Yeah, I'll tell you when it happened. I was at the River Café from 85 to 92. And then I was going to open a restaurant with Drew Nearpont, and we were going to do something with De Niro. And that was that whole Tribeca grill time. And we were going to do, not Tribeca, we're going to do something else. And then Alan Stillman called Drew, actually got my number from Drew. He heard I was leaving the River Café. And Alan Stillman and I made a deal. I learned how to run a business from him. You know, he had created TGI Fridays, he had Smith and Walensky, and we opened Park Avenue Cafe to great success in 1992. And that was a big restaurant. And so I came from the creative mad scientist of the River Cafe kitchens and breaking every rule you could, and with success, and then going to a corporate environment where I had more structure in that corporation. You know, Buzzy ran a great River Cafe and a water club, and he let the chefs do what he did, and that was his genius. Let us cook. He didn't want Buzzy's like, I don't want you in the office. I have a buyer for you. I have an admin person for you. Just you're the quarterback. I want you throwing touchdowns.
Yep.
Game. You work offense and defense. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's what I wanted to do. The modern day, you don't have that in a chef. Now you have. So at Alan Stillman, I was on the executive committee. I became a partner, and that's when you learn how to make money. You start looking at P&Ls. You start looking at food costs. Our food costs were always good. Our labor costs was great because back then we had people that came to work to learn, which you don't. If I didn't need a cook back then, I could say, if you want the job, just start coming in and working for free. And when somebody quits, you got the job. So we might have 2 or 3 people working for free for 6 weeks, and someone else goes back to school or is moving or quits or gets fired. Boom, there are understudies right there. And the fact that Cook knew that their replacement was in the building already, if they did up or misbehaved or had issues or weren't performing, made them work harder. So it was a great time back then as well. But being with Alan for decades, and is how I learned marketing, advertising, taking chances. He was a good marketing guy for sure, and also he loved the business. He had fun. He had fun with his ads. He had fun with the Wine Week he started, and he was on the original board of Restaurant Week in '92. You know, so he did a lot did a lot to teach me the business end of the business, as well as he did a lot for the dining in New York.
So in your, you're talking about some of the problems we see all the time, and I'm going to steal some of Fred's thunder because this is usually his question. How and where and does AI have a place in your restaurants?
I don't know yet. I don't know. I can tell you that I was talking in a meeting with my team yesterday about how hospitality has gotten cold since Open Table came on board, right? Since there's nobody answering the phone anymore at restaurants. You know, the maitre d' is kind of gone. You know, we're in New York City. When you start going further out, when someone makes a reservation on Open Table or Resi or one of those, and it says, there's no seats available at 7, he go to the next slot. You know, that whole being able to talk to someone on the phone and saying, listen, can I get a quiet table in the corner? My mother-in-law's, she can't hear that well, or I have a special date and I need a romantic area. Or can you make sure I don't sit at the bar that long, wait for a table because I got a handicapped person? All of that stuff goes away. You know, the tipping the maitre d', the ensuring, that you're getting the table. With Open Table, with computers, you miss human touch, right? You miss that. You don't overbook now, right? And then you walk in, and the mistake a lot of restaurants make is there, and I'm not talking about the best restaurants in New York, I'm talking about restaurants in general, is they put a hostess at the door who's 19 years old, who's going back to college soon, or who's temporary. So, or a cute face at the door, boy, man or woman, who's, here you go, answer the phone and seat these people. That's the first impression people get when they walk in your restaurant. Someone should be greeting them that knows Mr. Smith just came back for the 4th time this month. right? We should treat them special. They should, communicate with them and show them that we're happy that you're in the building and you're in our house. And that's gone by the wayside with technology. Or AI, I don't know how it's going to help us. It might be some automation, but I don't know if that's long-term help. Maybe it helps with some, some savings. Don't know. Don't know if look at Easy Pass. Easy Pass doesn't help me with savings as the commuter, does it? It helps me get there a little faster. Maybe the line's not as long, but it didn't help my pocket. It's helping somebody's pocket.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So we touched on it before. The other thing you see in the papers all the time is food inflation, and you touched on switching back and forth. But how does one design menus? I mean, a mainstay in was skirt steak. Skirt steak was, when I was a kid, skirt steak was throwaway steak. It was the thing that people with no money ate because it had to be marinated, and it cost about 79 cents a pound. 79 cents a pound. I went to Stu Leonard's the other day, and it was $30 a pound. So how do you, who are serving a high-end customer, how do you design a meal that delivers the flavor profile that you love, but is not a shock when the bill comes?
Skirt steak. Problem with skirt steak is during the pandemic, everybody went to skirt steak, and then there was supply and demand. So once the demand went up, so did the price, right? And then skirt steak got hot, and so because the other meats, the prime cuts are super expensive. When you look at the value in a cut of meat or protein, whether it's fish, meat, poultry, you can't just put all the high-end stuff on the menu. And in comes some of the ethnic restaurants, right? Where can someone feel like they're getting value? At a sushi restaurant, right? But are you really getting value at a sushi restaurant when you're getting, even 12 pieces of sushi is 6 ounces of fish? Maybe, right? Right. So, but if you got a 6 tuna in front of you as a main course, let's say that's $35 for 6 or 12 pieces. Maybe it's $40. But if you put a 6 ounce piece of tuna in front of somebody for $40, that they're not coming back. So it's in the, so what are you selling? You're selling craft. You're selling craft, and it's filling. So you're getting enough food, and it's pretty, and it's designer, and it's not costing them that much. The same as a taco, right? Let's go out for Mexican food.
Yep.
Now what do you put? You put in minced chicken, shaved chicken, or sliced beef, or fajita, or skirt steak, 2 ounces into 3 tacos. That's 6 ounces. That's enough for dinner, right? But if you put a 6 ounce skirt steak in front of someone for $36, it's not enough. So it's in the craftsmanship, the design of the menu. Ethnic food has been like that because they don't waste food. These countries traditionally don't have food to waste, nor did they eat like an American cowboy did, a 16-ounce steak. Nobody needs a 16-ounce steak for dinner. Nobody needs a blue cheese, bacon, tomato salad, blue cheese dressing, or like what do you call that? A wedge, followed by a steak and potatoes, followed by a cheesecake and a double espresso. That's just not normal eating around the world. In a stockbroker steakhouse, it is, but it's hard to afford that now. So you have to get crafty in the way you want to. If I want to serve a lobster appetizer, I can make a lobster bisque and make money, but I have to have a lobster main course on the menu because I need the shells. If I make lobster dumplings and I can charge $22 3 or 4 dumplings that has XYZ meat in it, the money I spent is in the craftsmanship and the labor and my expertise to get that on a plate at a certain price and make some money. So if you're either going to buy a steak and put on a plate, or you're going to butcher your own meat and make something that is a combo of high and low, so that you can, it's called menu design. I mean, and being smart about it. put a 4-ounce fillet or 5-ounce fillet on a plate on top of a bolognese or a short rib ragu, I can lower my cost per plate and still charge a good amount.
And then my other question that goes with that is, you're one of the few guys that's been successful in the city and in the suburbs, if you will. Is the customer a different, are you selling season tickets, if you will, in one market where you're trying to get repetitive visits in the same week from a customer versus the city where you're looking for somebody to come once a month?
That's a good question.
How does the menu reflect that?
Here's a great question. The menu, there's something in the suburbs called menu fatigue. Because in the suburbs, when you're in a certain zip code or whatever, you're going to get people that might come 3 times a month, maybe more. And after 4 months, they've had everything on the menu. So, you have to have core. There's no expense accounts in the suburbs either. And people aren't going out buying big bottles of wine because they work for JP Morgan or what have you, and they're bringing out clients. There's no conventions. There's, or very few. So there's repeat business. And in order to keep a repeat business happy, you got to work harder. So it's harder in the suburbs to stay as busy as in the city because you don't have the population, you don't have the influx of tourism, the conventioneers, and just the amount of people, right? So yes, you could be busier in New York, and marketing's harder in the suburbs to get. Now the competition drops way off in the suburbs too, right? You bring New York expertise out there and design a good restaurant and make people feel like they're eating in a world-class restaurant. Yeah, that's great. But you got to deliver also. And when people spend their own money in their own backyard, whether it be in the best zip code in Jersey or White Plains or North Carolina, when they're spending their own money, it's not the company's money. There's a different expectation.
Okay, I'm going to turn the clock back to a previous virtual breakfast session when we did opening in Manhattan as opposed to the Burbs, and you gave a great story on the attitude of people when they walk into a restaurant in Manhattan, and when you actually use the French Laundry as an example. Can you please share that again with the people here, because that was so true.
Here's the example, because I get it from France. Years ago, best restaurants in the chateaus in France were in Burgundy in the countryside, and there were former on wineries in the States, villages, and near a spa, what have you. And I used French Laundry and Per Se because I know Thomas, and I've eaten both of them several times. Both got excellent food. They're both world class, no doubt about it, right? But when you're in Napa Valley, your mindset before you even set foot in a restaurant is different, right? Because you didn't hit traffic. You didn't have a stressful day. Most likely you're at a spa, winery, you're on vacation, right? So you arrive on time. You're in beautiful Napa Valley with the weather, right? So before you walk in the door, you got a 5-star mentality. This is going to be great. The stress level's low. New York City, you go to Per Se or any other restaurant, you could hit traffic. You could get splashed by a cab, FU'd by somebody else. Your meeting ran late. There's traffic here or there. There's noise. Your hotel, whatever. There's so many things that lead to so stressed out before you even walk in the door. So so walking into Per Se versus walking to French Laundry, that greeting has to be a little bit more, you need to take the edge off. Maybe the drink has to be a little stiffer. Maybe whatever it is, they probably have to work harder to turn somebody around that had a bad day, as opposed to you would agree that more people have bad days in New York City than that, right?
Yeah. Been there. So one other thing that I want to make a point of, and both Fred and I, we call people all the time on the phone. And I call people and I get secretaries and I get messages, and I'll call you. I'm busy right now. I'll call you back, and it never comes. Every time I've ever called you, you've either picked up the phone and said hello, or if it went to a voicemail, you called me right back. Now, how does a guy who runs an operation like your hospitality company and high pressure and, the heat in the kitchen, why are you just a regular guy? How is it that you're so approachable? What is it in you that makes people want to talk to you and get to talk to you?
I don't know, but I appreciate that compliment. I've been told that I have a couple of consulting jobs on that same thing. There was a time when nobody called me. I won't forget that time, right? So when people call me, especially, and I might not even recognize the number, I call back because normally opportunity. I don't get crank calls. I don't get that many solicitation calls. So I look at it as respectful to call somebody back, right? And also figure it out. Now, sometimes I miss it. I'm busy, yes, if I'm driving a lot, but there's usually opportunity one way or another on the end of a call. And if not, there's hospitality. And that's the business I'm in. I mean, if I'm not hospitable enough to return a phone call, especially if somebody wants to, even someone asking me a question that used to work for me about, Chef, hey, how do you do this? Or I might be quitting my job. Can you give me advice? Or someone that wants to interview you, or someone that wants to hire you and offer you money. And so I can give you two examples. I have two jobs that I still have, and I've had for 5 years as a man consulting for a couple of properties. And and it goes on, the GM who called me, he goes, I called about 6 celebrity chefs. And I called you. You called me the next morning at 7 a.m. He texted me back, and I met you the next day, and I hired you. And he goes, of the other 5 or 6 people I called, no one ever called back. And he goes, you know what? He goes, and that means you get things done. And I want to get it off my list. Like I have those sticky notes in my head. I have a list that I like to start fresh every day. And I don't like having things out there that are not being worked on or take off the list. And there's things, our ambition is high. There's certain things that I haven't gotten to yet that I want to get to. There's a TV show and something called Culinary Religion, of clothing line I want to work on. It has, that reminds people in our business why hospitality is so important. And, because there's a lot of people in the hospitality business now that are not hospitable. It's like someone that doesn't like people trying to sell real estate. You know what I mean? It's like, go out people be so, and honestly, because it's become such a hip business, restaurant, and cool to be a chef, and that people are leapfrogging over the giving and hospitality part of it, just to be in a business that's energetic, cool, thriving, sexy. TV has a lot to do with that, and also the investors. People want to invest in restaurants. They think it's, they want to say, hey, I'm a partner there and I own this, and and I get a table all the time, and that's great. That's all great. But, and the investor section is different than the people operating it. So, but I do get back to people, and I try to do my best. Because I don't know. I've always been the same guy as I was when I.
You also seem to be one of the few guys that still likes to cook. You're not busy on your way out the door on the way to build some TV show and a brand. You seem to genuinely love your craft. What do you see with that?
Honestly, I wish I cook more. I almost think a day where, operate one restaurant and go in that kitchen in the morning and make specials and teach a young chef because I started at a certain point in the 70s, 80s, and got to work with some real masters. So I understand the old methods and I understand the new method. Now, I'm not an expert on all the new technology and this and that, but I get it. And it's like an architect. If you know how to, the basic of building buildings, etc., you can figure out how to make the building slanted or circular or whatever, or connect two of them. You know what I mean? So, but cooking to me and creating something is such joy. I mean, I sometimes during the pandemic, I never really cooked at home because I've always been working in restaurants. I started cooking at home, and I would laugh at some of the stuff I would put together, and then sometimes be reminded of what a good cook I really am as a flavor technician.
Okay.
Interesting.
You know, we're getting close to that time, and I will open it up to people in the audience. Does anybody have a question for David?
I have one. So David, and we've spoken about this before, but where does your creativity come from? I mean, there are thousands of chefs in the world, and then there's a smaller group of people, but you are known, and your moniker has always been creativity. And you look at things like your swordfish chop and the bacon we talked about earlier. Where does that come from?
Not letting go of stuff. I mean, the sword chop is a good example. It's a great example. And I was out to dinner with a young lady I was dating way back when I was a chef at the River Café. And we were eating at a late night sushi joint in the village. I don't know where it was, but it was after midnight. And I had a trout collar or something like that. And I cut it, and there was a little chop that looked like a rabbit chop, tiny little thing that came off the collar. It just happened to fall off the way I cut it. And I wrote on the napkin, chop, small fish, small chop, big fish, big chop. And I had that napkin a couple of years, note card, napkin, whatever. And then when I met Alan Stillman and he hired me, Mr. Steakhouse in New York City, to do Open Park Ave, I finally got off my butt, went to the fish market, got a swordfish collar, and cut it up right in front of him during construction, and we came up with a beautiful dish. So it's the yes I can attitude. It's the why not instead of the why, right? It's
Okay.
like what happened to me yesterday. Somebody was to me 2 days ago about a Brussels sprout dish they had with Captain Crunch, right? Interesting. Now the word Captain Crunch got in my head, right? 8 hours of brunch, and down on the lake restaurant I have in Charlotte, which is surrounded by families. And I'm like, what about Captain Crunch brunch, where once a month we feature a kid-friendly, 5 dishes with Captain Crunch. It sounds like Captain Crunch. Right now, you do a Captain Crunch martini. It's on the water, Captain of the Sea, and Captain Morgan. And then all of a sudden, you start connecting dots. You can do a Captain Crunch pancake or French toast or fried chicken. It's in the South. And all of a sudden, you might have. All of a sudden, it's a kid-friendly brunch that good for a Captain Crunch milkshake. And it just sounds fun, right? So we might throw that. Might never happen. We might do it for kids charity, but it's the curiosity of doing something different and also improvement. Why wouldn't I want to get what I do all the time? I think that's kind of what's built into me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Listen, we have a couple more questions, and then we're going to have to go. So, David, we're going to switch gears a little bit here, and this is something that is an AI, I guess, invented thing. Yelp reviews. What do you do when you get the crank, the person who has a beef, and they decide, since they're sort of anonymous, to take it out on you on Yelp? How do you face those reviews, and do you answer them directly, or do you just say, can't please everybody?
No, we try to answer. I don't directly answer any of them usually, unless I really feel we dropped the ball, and then I'll call myself. Like if it says, "Listen, we had a party, and this wasn't," if I get really upset with my management, because I think it's first of all, you got to read them and understand how they're written, and you can certainly tell sometimes whether it's an amateur writer or someone that's upset about pricing, or someone that's, because when someone says I came in and we had the mussels and we got sick. Okay, well, 40 other people had mussels too. It's hard to tell me that the next day you got sick from mussels when nobody else did, and we're a busy restaurant and we don't serve food that's old, right? So it's hard to, you still got to listen, You got to look into it, and then you read between the lines. Sometimes people look for free meals. Sometimes people are right, and you had a bad night, and you got to answer that correctly. But I think some people sometimes aren't even reasonable about their complaints. Some people walk in a bad mood, and they're having a fight with their husband or wife or a bad date, and they're looking and they're just bitching. So, but Yelp reviews, Yelp happens to be the one that, because it's anonymous, your competitor could be hurting you. But Yelp also, if you want to pay Yelp and advertise with them, they get rid of your bad reviews. So it's, it got you here and there, right?
Yeah, it's a paying for protection. I think there's an organization that is based on that, but we'll go past that. Another question here. Somebody wanted to know about the philanthropic side of David. What are you doing? How are you reaching out and helping people?
We have during pandemic, we had Feed the Heroes. We have we do scholarships in both Johnson and Wales University and at Brookdale Community College in New Jersey. We're involved in Table to Table. I sit on the board, and that's a Northern Jersey food rescue program. We're also involved in Cancer Foundation. We're doing a huge 800-person event in the fall in Charlotte. We're involved in a lot of the Meals on Wheels. We help when we can, and various other charities whenever asked. But we're also on the board of a couple of others, and we've been doing this for a long time. So we try to help people with our own organization as much as possible, communities that we operate.
Okay. Well, folks, it's that time. We would love to go on forever, but some of us have other jobs besides sitting here. And so, David, I'd like you to wrap it up. If you would leave us with one point that you want people to remember, who maybe want to start their own restaurant or want to get into the restaurant industry, what would be that point that you would give them?
I would tell you that if you want to get into the restaurant business, need to the business, work in the business, you got to be good in the business. And if you're not going to work in the business, if you invest in someone, make sure that you're investing and get to know the people you're investing in and go through all the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? But for the young chefs out there and the young managers and entrepreneurs, you need to put on the brakes a little, slow down, and learn more before you jump in the pool, because it's very risky. And knowledge is power, right? And sometimes, some economy, it's better to be an employee at a high level than an entrepreneur in a bad economy. And sometimes you got to keep that in mind. There's a lot more security in a good job that offers you benefits and long-term growth. But there's also a lot of excitement and sexiness in owning your own business. So you gotta weigh those out. Now, sometimes those decisions are based on family and commitment to family, which is very important, because this is a time-consuming, and being a celebrity chef or a restaurateur or entrepreneur at a certain level, it's a lifestyle. It's not a job. All right, you can have a job and do well in this business. Be an entrepreneur, it's a lifestyle, and you're married to it.
Okay.
And anyway, if anyone has questions, I do answer.
All right. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Fred, any last comments?
Just thank you. The guys, you're just amazing. The way you continue to reinvent yourself, unbelievable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, folks, it's that time where we have to start saying goodbye, and we will be back in 2 weeks. So check out Eventbrite, check out your LinkedIn pages to see what we are offering is. And I'd like to thank you all for coming here. And like always, I only have 2 things to say. Everybody, stay positive, test negative. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks again.